The phone rang at 7:13 a.m. exactly 6 days after we buried Howard. When I saw Marcus's name flash across the screen, my heart sank. Something told me this wasn't a wellness check. "Mom, we need to talk about arrangements," he said, not even bothering with a good morning or "how are you holding up." His voice was different, businesslike, detached. Nothing like the tearful son who had promised his dying father he'd take care of me. "I know we discussed you moving in with us after Dad passed, but Vanessa and I have been talking and—" He cleared his throat. "It's just not going to work out, Mom. The house is already too crowded with the kids and they need their space to grow." The words hit me like a physical blow. My own son, my firstborn, was backing out of the promise he'd made to his father on his deathbed. "Marcus, your father. I know what I told Dad." He cut me off, irritation seeping into his voice. "But things change, Mom. We didn't realize how complicated it would be. Vanessa thinks we both think it would be best if you looked into one of those senior communities, the ones with activities and people your age." I couldn't speak. My throat closed up as if someone were strangling me. For 45 years I had been Margaret Anderson, devoted wife to Howard, loving mother to Marcus and Olivia. Now, 6 days after becoming a widow, I was apparently nothing more than an inconvenience. "Mom, are you still there?" I managed to whisper. "Yes, I'm here," though I wasn't sure where here was anymore. The 4-bedroom colonial in suburban Boston that Howard and I had purchased in our 30s certainly didn't feel like home without him, but it was still mine, ours. The house where I had raised my children, hosted Christmas dinners, and nursed my husband through his final battle with pancreatic cancer. "We can talk more about this later," Marcus said, sounding relieved to end the conversation. "I've got to get the kids ready for school. Think about what I said about the senior places. Okay, love you." The line went dead before I could respond. Howard and I met in college, him studying engineering, me pursuing elementary education. We married young, bought our first apartment, and saved every penny. By the time I was pregnant with Marcus, we had enough for a down payment on the colonial. It needed work, but Howard spent weekends painting, fixing, and building. I still remember the pride in his eyes when he built the treehouse in the backyard oak for Marcus's 7th birthday. When Olivia came along 4 years later, I put my teaching career on hold. Howard's engineering job was demanding, often requiring late nights and business trips. Someone needed to raise our children, and I embraced that role with everything I had. Those were happy years, marked by school plays and soccer games, family vacations to Cape Cod, and gradual upgrades to our beloved home. New hardwood floors. When Marcus started high school. A renovated kitchen the year Olivia left for college. The sunroom addition that became Howard's favorite spot to read after he retired. Through it all, our home was more than just a structure. It was the physical embodiment of our life together, our achievements, our love. The diagnosis came 3 years ago. Stage 3 pancreatic cancer. 12 to 15 months. The doctor had said not meeting our eyes. Howard beat those odds. Fighting for almost 2 years, determined to see Olivia's wedding and the birth of Marcus's second child. In those final months, as Howard grew weaker, talks of the future became more urgent. I was 67, healthy, but not getting younger. Our savings were substantial, but not limitless, especially after the medical bills. The house was paid off, our most valuable asset. "Don't worry about Mom," Marcus had assured his father during one of our hospital visits. "Vanessa and I have plenty of room. We'll take care of her." Howard had squeezed his hand weakly. "Promise me, son." I promised Dad. "Mom will always have a home with us." Vanessa had nodded enthusiastically, her diamond earrings catching the fluorescent hospital lights. Of course, Howard Margaret is family. I hadn't been entirely comfortable with the arrangement. I valued my independence, but seeing the relief on my dying husband's face had been worth the compromise, and Marcus's home in the same suburb was spacious, a newly built mini-mansion, financed partly by Howard's generous gift of $100,000 toward their down payment a few years earlier. Now it seemed promises made to dying men were easily broken once they were no longer around to hold anyone accountable. The days following Marcus's call were a blur of grief, not just for Howard, but for the future I thought I had. I wandered through our home like a ghost, touching Howard's sweaters, still hanging in the closet, staring at his collection of history books, crying over the coffee mug with his name that I couldn't bring myself to put away. A week later, Marcus and Vanessa invited me to Sunday dinner. I went hoping for what? An apology, a change of heart. Instead, I got a sales pitch. "We found the most amazing place, Mom," Vanessa said, passing me a glossy brochure across their marble dining table. Sunset Haven. It's not one of those depressing nursing homes. It's a luxury senior living community. They have a pool movie nights, even cooking classes. I stared at the smiling seniors on the brochure, all with perfectly coiffed silver hair and bright cardigans, engaged in what looked like a rousing game of cards. "I'm not even 70 yet," I said quietly, "and I'm perfectly capable of living independently." Marcus cleared his throat. "Of course you are, Mom, but living alone in that big house, it's not practical, and think about the maintenance costs, the property taxes." "Your father and I manage just fine," I replied, trying to keep the hurt from my voice. "That was different." Vanessa interjected, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on the table. "Howard was handy. He could fix things. Who's going to take care of all that now?" I wanted to remind her that I wasn't helpless, that I had managed our household finances for decades, that I knew how to call a plumber when needed. Instead, I just stared at my barely touched roast chicken. Their children, my grandchildren, were conspicuously absent from dinner, apparently at a playdate. I couldn't help but wonder if they'd been purposely sent away so the adults could discuss putting Grandma in a home. As I was leaving, I overheard Marcus in his home office, the door slightly ajar. "Yes, we're working on it," he was saying to someone on the phone. "Once we figure out the mom situation, we can move forward with selling. The market's hot right now. We could be looking at 7 figures easily for that location." I froze in the hallway, my hand clutching my purse strap so tightly my knuckles went white. The mom situation. Selling it took everything in me not to burst through the door and confront him. Instead, I quietly slipped out the pieces, falling into horrible place. They weren't concerned about my welfare. They wanted the house, my house, and they were already planning to sell it. Before Howard was even cold in his grave. That night I sat in Howard's study, surrounded by his things, and sobbed. Like I hadn't since receiving his diagnosis. I felt so utterly alone. Olivia lived in Arizona with her new husband, too far to be of immediate help. Our friends were wonderful, but dealing with their own aging issues. And my son, the child. I had nursed through chickenpox and coached through college applications, was now viewing me as nothing more than an obstacle to his inheritance. In my misery, I pulled out the family photo albums, seeking comfort in happier memories. Between the pages of our 35th anniversary album, I found a folder of documents that Howard had apparently stored there. Inside were the deed to our house, insurance policies, and a handwritten letter addressed to me. "My dearest Margaret, if you're reading this, I'm probably gone. I'm sorry for leaving you too soon. There's so much more I wanted us to do together. I need you to know something important. The house is yours fully and completely." I never added Marcus to the deed as he's been pressuring me to do. He kept talking about estate planning and avoiding probate. But something didn't feel right. I've seen how Vanessa looks around our home already, mentally redecorating. I've noticed Marcus's comments about what the property could sell for. Call me overprotective, even from the grave. But I wanted to make sure you were taken care of on your terms, not theirs. The house is your safety net. Sell it if you want a smaller place. Keep it if it brings you comfort. But don't let anyone pressure you into decisions that aren't right for you. I love you more than I've ever been able to properly express. Howard. I read the letter 3 times, tears streaming down my face, not just tears of grief now, but of gratitude for my husband's foresight and of awakening anger. The next morning I called my friend Jessica. Unlike most of our mutual friends who had moved to warmer climates for retirement, Jessica had stayed in Boston after her own husband passed 5 years earlier. She had reinvented herself, going from grieving widow to vibrant independent woman with an active social life and even a part-time job at a local bookstore that she loved. "They want to put you in a home and sell your house," she practically shouted through the phone. Oh, hell no, Margaret Howard would be rolling in his grave. "I don't know what to do," I admitted. "I never thought Marcus would behave this way." Jessica's voice softened. "Grief changes people, honey, but so does greed. And from what you're telling me, this sounds a lot more like the latter." "I can't believe my own son." "Stop right there," Jessica interrupted. "This isn't the time to be a mother making excuses for bad behavior. This is the time to be Margaret Anderson, a woman protecting herself and honoring her husband's wishes." Something shifted inside me at her words. For decades, I had defined myself primarily as someone's mother, someone's wife. Perhaps it was time to rediscover who Margaret was on her own terms. "You're right," I said, straightening my shoulders even though Jessica couldn't see me. "Howard protected me even after he's gone. I won't let that be in vain." "That's my girl," Jessica said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. "Now I happen to know an excellent real estate attorney. Shall I give him a call?" Robert Chen's office was in a converted brownstone downtown, the interior far more modern than the historic exterior suggested. The attorney himself was a sharp-dressed man in his late 50s, with kind eyes behind stylish glasses. "Mrs. Anderson, based on what you've told me and the documents you've provided, the situation is quite clear," he said after reviewing everything. "The house is solely in your name. Your late husband never added your son to the deed, nor is there any legal document promising the property to him as inheritance. So I can sell it." I asked, still not quite believing I was having this conversation. "You can absolutely sell it," he confirmed. "It's your property to do with as you wish. Your son has no legal claim to it whatsoever, regardless of any verbal discussions or expectations." I nodded slowly, processing this information. "What about, I don't know if I'm using the right term, right of first refusal? Should I offer to sell it to Marcus first?" Robert leaned back in his chair. "You're not legally obligated to do so, but I understand family dynamics can be complicated. If you want to give him that opportunity, we can certainly structure something. However," he hesitated. "Please be direct." I encouraged him. "Based on what you've shared about your son's behavior, I'm concerned he might try to manipulate the situation. If he knows you're considering selling, he might pressure you to sell to him at below market value, or try to delay the process while he secures financing, potentially leaving you in limbo." I thought about Marcus's recent behavior, the years of subtle comments about the house's value, how he and Vanessa had toured the property with assessing eyes whenever they visited. "I think you're right," I said finally. "I need to protect myself first." Robert nodded approvingly. "In that case, I suggest we work with a reputable real estate agent to determine the current market value and prepare the house for sale. You're under no obligation to inform your son until you have a signed purchase agreement if that's how you wish to proceed." As I left Robert's office that day, I felt a strange mixture of sadness and liberation. The house held 40 years of memories, the good and the bad, the celebrations and the quiet everyday moments that made up a life. Selling it felt like closing a chapter permanently, but perhaps that's exactly what I needed. Over the next 2 months, I embraced a methodical transformation, both of my home and myself. On Jessica's recommendation, I hired Maria, a skilled home stager with a talent for highlighting a property's best features without erasing its character. "This wood craftsmanship is exquisite," Maria commented, running her hand along the built-in bookshelves Howard had painstakingly installed in the living room. "We don't want to paint over this, we want to showcase it." Together we refreshed the house with neutral paint colors, decluttered decades of accumulated possessions, and rearranged furniture to enhance the flow of each room. The process was therapeutic, allowing me to touch and remember objects before deciding whether to donate or discard them. While preparing the house, I was also preparing myself. Jessica introduced me to her circle of friends, mostly women my age who had weathered their own life transitions. We met weekly for coffee, their stories of resilience and reinvention bolstering my resolve. I joined a yoga class specifically designed for seniors, surprised by how good the gentle stretching felt on my aging joints. I consulted a financial advisor recommended by Robert, mapping out how the proceeds from the house sale could sustain me through my remaining years. And most importantly, I researched housing options near Olivia in Arizona. My daughter had been horrified by Marcus's behavior when I finally told her what was happening. "Move here, Mom," she had urged during our video call. "Richard and I don't have a mansion like Marcus, but we've got a lovely guest house you could stay in until you find your own place." The offer warmed my heart, but I valued my independence too much to live permanently in someone else's space. Even my beloved daughter's instead, I focused my search on small, single-level homes in her neighborhood, picturing a new life surrounded by desert blooms instead of New England maples. Throughout all this, Marcus called occasionally, always steering the conversation toward sensible next steps. And those senior living brochures, I kept our conversations brief and noncommittal, a strategy that grew easier with practice. "I'm still figuring things out," became my standard response. "I'll let you know when I've made decisions." It wasn't a lie I was figuring things out, just not in the way he expected. 3 months after Howard's passing, my realtor Amanda called with news that made my heart race. "We have an offer, Margaret. It's above asking price, minimal contingencies, and they can close quickly." The buyers were a young couple expecting their first child, beginning their family journey in the home where mine had matured and ultimately transformed. There was a poetic rightness to it that brought tears to my eyes. "They love the house," Amanda continued, "especially the sunroom. The wife's already planning to use it as a nursery." Howard would have liked that, I thought. His favorite space repurposed to welcome new life. I accepted the offer that afternoon, setting a closing date just 3 weeks away. Only then did I call Marcus. "Mom, is everything okay?" He answered, unusual concern in his voice. We typically spoke on Sundays, and this was a Wednesday. "Everything's fine," I said, surprised by how steady my voice sounded. "I'm calling because I've made some decisions, and I wanted you to hear them from me directly." Decisions about what? Wariness had crept into his tone. "About the house." I said simply, "I've decided to sell it." The silence that followed was so profound, I might have thought we'd been disconnected, if not for his sharp intake of breath. "You're what?" Without discussing it with me. His voice had risen an octave. "I'm informing you now," I replied calmly. "The house has sold. We close in 3 weeks." "This is Mom. This is completely inappropriate. That house is my inheritance. Dad always said." "Your father left the house to me," I cut in, my voice still level but firm. "It's my name on the deed, no one else's." "But we had an understanding," Marcus was shouting now. "Vanessa and I have already talked to contractors about renovations. We've been planning." "Planning what exactly?" I asked, heat finally entering my voice. "Planning how to handle the mom situation before selling for 7 figures. Yes, I overheard you, Marcus. At Sunday dinner when you thought I'd left." His stuttering response confirmed everything. In the background, I could hear Vanessa demanding to know what was happening. "Where will you even go?" Marcus finally managed a desperate edge to his question. "Arizona," I replied. "I'm buying a small house near Olivia. The contracts are already in process." "You can't be serious," and he exploded. "You're moving across the country away from your grandchildren. What kind of grandmother?" "The kind who recognizes when she's being valued only for what she can provide." I interrupted, an unexpected calm washing over me. "And Marcus, I also know about the senior living community tours you and Vanessa took last month. Mr. Sullivan from church saw you at Sunset Haven. Apparently you were asking about their waiting list policy for urgent move-ins." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. Mom. His voice had lost its edge, replaced with something that might have been shame. We were just exploring options. As was I. I replied, and I've made my choice. After hanging up, I sat in Howard's chair, trembling slightly from the confrontation. I'd never spoken to my son that way before. Never needed to. But the Margaret who had raised him had had Howard by her side, balancing her softness with his occasional firmness. Now I needed to be both soft and firm, nurturing and protective of myself. The next few days brought a barrage of calls from Marcus from Vanessa. Even from Marcus's in-laws, whom I'd always found rather unpleasant. I stopped answering my phone altogether, communicating only through text messages with Olivia and Jessica. Marcus even showed up at the house one evening, pounding on the door until Mrs. Peterson from next door threatened to call the police about the disturbance. "This isn't over, Mom," he had shouted through the door. "You can't just make decisions like this without family input." Family input. As if I weren't family. As if I were just an old woman who needed to be managed rather than a person with agency and desires of my own. The day of closing arrived with surprising swiftness. I stood in the empty foyer of the Colonial for the last time. Sunlight streaming through the windows, Howard had diligently washed every spring. The house echoed with absence of furniture, of Howard, of the life we'd built. Yet I didn't feel empty. The check from the sale was already deposited, my new home in Arizona awaiting my arrival. Jessica would drive me to the airport tomorrow, beginning my new chapter. Marcus had made several attempts to change my mind, cycling through anger-guilt trips, and finally half-hearted reconciliation. Vanessa had stopped speaking to me entirely, apparently unable to forgive me for derailing their plans. I had expected to feel more guilt than I did. After all, isn't a mother supposed to sacrifice everything for her children? Hadn't that been my role for decades? But Howard's letter had reminded me that protecting myself wasn't selfish. It was necessary. As I locked the front door for the final time, I spotted movement across the street. Mrs. Peterson, our neighbor of 35 years, was watching from her porch. I crossed over to say a proper goodbye. "Howard would be proud of you," she said, embracing me tightly. "He worried so much about leaving you alone." "I'm not alone," I replied, surprised to find I meant it. "I'm just starting over." Mrs. Peterson smiled. "The best adventures often start that way." She pressed something into my hand, a small envelope. "Howard asked me to give you this. When the time was right, I think. Now is that time." Puzzled, I opened it after returning to my car. Inside was a simple note in Howard's familiar handwriting. "My brave Margaret. If you're reading this, you've made a difficult choice, whatever it is. I know it's the right one for you. You've always been stronger than you give yourself credit for. Remember our favorite quote, 'It's never too late to be what you might have been. Your second act is just beginning. My love, make it magnificent forever. Yours, Howard.'" Tears blurred my vision as I put the car in drive. How well he had known me, known that I would need this final encouragement to move forward without him. I was leaving behind the physical space we had shared, but I was taking his love and wisdom with me. The Arizona sun greeted me like an old friend when I stepped off the plane, its warmth so different from the crisp New England fall I'd left behind. Olivia waved enthusiastically from beyond security, her husband Richard beside her. "Mom," she called, wrapping me in a fierce hug. "Welcome to your new life." My new home was everything I'd hoped for. A modest single level with a covered patio overlooking a small garden already blooming with desert flowers. Olivia had arranged for basic furniture to be delivered, ensuring I wouldn't spend my first night on the floor. "It's perfect," I told her as we toured the space. "Just the right size for one person starting fresh." "Are you sure you're okay?" Olivia asked later as we shared tea on the patio. "With everything that happened with Marcus, the house." I considered her question carefully. "I'm sad," I admitted. "Sad that Howard isn't here to see this new adventure. Sad that Marcus chose greed over compassion. But I'm not broken. Olivia, if anything, I feel more whole than I have in years. And it was true. For so long, I had defined myself by my relationships to others, Howard's wife Marcus and Olivia's mother, the grandchildren's grandmother. Now at 67, I was rediscovering Margaret Anderson as her own person with wants and needs that mattered. 2 months into my Arizona life, I had established new routines. Morning walks before the heat became unbearable, volunteering at the local library twice a week. Sunday dinners with Olivia's family. I joined a painting class and discovered a latent talent for watercolors. My desert landscapes improving with each attempt. Marcus called on Christmas, his voice subdued. "The kids miss you," he said. "We all do." "I miss them too." I replied honestly. "Mom, about the house. I'm sorry. We shouldn't have. I shouldn't have." He struggled to find the right words. "No, you shouldn't have." I agreed quietly, "But it's done now. Could we maybe visit? In the spring, I want the kids to see where Grandma lives now." I thought about Howard's last lesson to me through his letter. Protecting myself didn't mean closing my heart forever. "I'd like that," I said finally. "The guest room is small, but there's a nice hotel nearby." His chuckle sounded relieved. Perhaps the beginning of a new understanding between us. After we hung up, I took my tea out to the patio and watched the sunset paint the desert in shades of pink and gold colors. Howard would have loved. I thought about the journey that had brought me here from devastated widow to empowered woman making her own choices. "Thank you," I whispered. Whether to Howard or to the universe, I wasn't sure. But I was grateful for this second chance, this unexpected new beginning. In the end, selling the house wasn't about revenge. Though I can't deny feeling a certain satisfaction when Marcus realized his plans had backfired. It was about honoring Howard's final gift to me, the freedom to choose my own path forward, unburdened by others' expectations or demands. That night I slept peacefully in my new home, no longer haunted by echoes of what was lost, but instead embraced by possibilities of what might yet be. At 67, my story wasn't ending. It was simply turning to a fresh blank page, waiting for me to write the next chapter. And for the first time since Howard's diagnosis, I was genuinely excited to discover what words would fill it,